Major Ken "Ghost" Collins pressed his oxygen mask to his face so hard the rubber squeaked. It wasn't just the altitude making his heart pound. It was the sheer terrifying audacity of what he was doing. Below him, the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush looked like broken glass under the unforgiving Afghan moonlight. A vast, silent ocean of rock and shadow. Above him, 2 Soviet MiG-29s, twin flares of raw power, were slicing through the frigid sky. Their afterburners, thundering like distant thunder, vibrated through his headset, a stark, unwelcome reminder of the hunters in the night. He was alone, a phantom in the dark, 500 miles deep inside airspace that was aggressively denied to any American presence. And he wasn't just flying any aircraft. He was piloting a machine so revolutionary, so profoundly secret, that the world wouldn't even know it existed for another decade. This wasn't just a flight. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm filled with geopolitical dynamite. One stray radio call from those MiGs, one radar lock from a ground station, one itchy trigger finger on either side of this invisible line, and the fragile détente of the Cold War could shatter. Overnight, the simmering tension could erupt into a global conflagration. How did he get here, balanced on the knife edge of apocalypse? What cosmic alignment of technology, desperation, and sheer human will led to this moment? Stay with me, because the next 15 minutes aren't just a story. They explain how a single black jet, one pilot, and a mission that never officially happened almost rewrote history, preventing a war most people never even knew was brewing. The powder keg, late 1986. Let's rewind, shall we? Back up 12 months from that fateful night. It's late 1986, and the Soviet Union's grinding war in Afghanistan is bleeding Moscow dry, of money, of resources, and most painfully, of its young men. The Red Army, once thought invincible, was mired in a brutal, unwinnable conflict against the tenacious Mujahideen. But Washington wasn't just watching the Soviets bleed. They were worried. Terribly worried. The fear wasn't just about Afghanistan. It was about what might come next. The strategic nightmare scenario. The Red Army, frustrated and seeking a warm water port, might roll right through neighboring Pakistan, a key U.S. ally, to seize control of the Arabian Sea. That would fundamentally shift the global balance of power, giving the Soviets unparalleled access to vital oil shipping lanes. Then, satellite photos started filtering in, stark and undeniable. High in the rugged mountains above Kandahar, Soviet engineers were putting the finishing touches on something new, something ominous, a cutting-edge early warning radar site. This wasn't just any radar. It was a sophisticated system designed to peer deep into Pakistani and Iranian airspace, potentially covering vast swathes of the Middle East. If it went live, every single bomber route, every covert intelligence flight into Soviet-adjacent airspace would be exposed. The strategic advantage the West tenuously held would vanish. The delicate balance of deterrence, the very foundation of Cold War stability, would tip dangerously in Moscow's favor. The president, fully briefed on the ramifications, wanted it gone. And he wanted it gone fast, quietly, and most importantly, deniably. This wasn't a job for a public declaration of war. A conventional airstrike, say a squadron of F-16s, would be too noisy, too public, and frankly, too easy to trace back to the U.S. It would be an act of war. Plain and simple, with all the terrifying consequences that implied. What about a cruise missile? In 1986, GPS was still in its infancy, a nascent technology barely out of the lab. Precision was a relative term, and the site itself was a natural fortress nestled deep within a protective stone bowl. A miss by even 30 feet wouldn't just be a failure. It would be a propaganda coup for the Kremlin, a clear demonstration of American impotence. So the National Security Council, faced with an impossible dilemma, turned to a program so secret, so deeply embedded in the black budget, that even its funding was laundered under the euphemism of special access. They needed a miracle. They needed an aircraft that could slip past the newest, most sophisticated Soviet radars as if it were a ghost. It had to deliver a laser-guided bomb with surgical precision, dropping it down an air shaft perhaps into the heart of the facility. And then it had to vanish, leaving no trace before the shockwave from the explosion even settled the dust. This was a mission for something utterly unprecedented. And that, my friends, is where Senior Trend entered the picture. What the engineers, with a touch of poetic license, called the F-117 Nighthawk. This wasn't just an aircraft. It was a gamble, a desperate hope, and a secret that would define a new era of warfare. The secret weapon, Skunk Works, Burbank, 1983-1986. Lockheed's legendary Skunk Works in Burbank, California, wasn't new to disappearing acts, not by a long shot. This clandestine division, born from the brilliance of Kelly Johnson, had practically invented the art of covert aviation. They gave us the U-2 Dragon Lady, a high-altitude spy plane that could peer behind the Iron Curtain, and later the sleek hypersonic SR-71 Blackbird, a machine so fast and so high-flying it outran every missile thrown at it. These were aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible, but this new order, this senior trend, was different. It demanded not just performance, but an entirely new kind of invisibility. The directive was simple, yet mind-bogglingly complex. Make an airplane with the radar signature of a marble. Not a small aircraft, mind you, but a tiny, insignificant blip, or ideally no blip at all. Kelly Johnson's successor, the equally brilliant Ben Rich, understood the magnitude of the challenge. He tasked a quiet, unassuming mathematician named Bill Schroeder with solving the impossible. Schroeder's epiphany was elegantly simple yet revolutionary: shape trumps coding. For decades, engineers had tried to make aircraft invisible by coating them in radar-absorbent materials, RAM. But Schroeder realized that no amount of coating could hide a conventional, rounded aircraft shape, which acts like a perfect radar reflector. Instead, he proposed a radical angular design. Flat, faceted panels like 1,000 tiny mirrors would bounce incoming radar beams not back to their source, but into empty sky, scattering them to the four winds. Think of it like a disco ball in reverse. Instead of reflecting light everywhere, it's designed to reflect radar away from the enemy's receiver. RAM still played a role, filling the cracks and edges where radar might still get a purchase, but the angles did the real. The result was something out of a science fiction novel. Two prototypes, known as Have Blue, first flew out of the secretive Groom Lake facility, Area 51, if you must, in 1981. The pilots, accustomed to sleek aerodynamic fighters, famously called them hopeless diamonds, because they looked like they'd been carved with a hatchet rather than designed by engineers, and they flew only at night, their ungainly shape and lack of conventional stealth features making them too vulnerable in daylight. But they worked. They vanished from radar screens. By 1986, the program had matured. The first operational squadron, the 415th Tactical Fighter Squadron, nicknamed the Night Stalkers, was officially established. Their base? A remote, unmarked ramp in the vast, desolate stretches of the Nevada desert, 150 miles northwest of Las Vegas, known only as Tonopah Test Range. Everything about it screamed secrecy, from the unmarked buses that ferried personnel to and from Vegas, to the total radio silence maintained by the base. Pilots were hand-picked volunteers, the cream of the crop, current on high-performance fighters like the F-15 and F-4. But they had to relearn how to fly from scratch. The F-117 was a beast of its own. It had no afterburner, meaning no sudden bursts of speed. There was no head-up display, HOD, to project vital flight data onto the canopy, and critically, no terrain-following radar. Why? Because every electronic emission, every ping of radar was a postcard to the enemy, an advertisement saying, "I'm here." They navigated by ancient methods. This was the brutal truth of stealth. It wasn't invisibility. It was time. Time to get in, time to accomplish the mission, and time to get out. All before anybody could draw a bead, before anyone could even realize you were there. By autumn of '86, the jet was combat ready, on paper at least. The question from Washington was blunt, direct, and laden with the weight of global stakes. Can you put a 2,000-pound GBU-27 laser-guided bomb through a ventilator grate in Afghanistan? Ben Rich, with the quiet confidence of a man who knew his team had built the impossible, answered with a legendary quote, "Give me a pilot crazy enough to fly through mountains at night and we'll write history in disappearing ink." It wasn't just bravado. It was a promise. When Ben Rich spoke of a pilot crazy enough, he wasn't just looking for courage. He was looking for a very specific breed of aviator, someone who lived on the edge, yet possessed an almost inhuman precision. Enter Ken Collins, call sign Ghost. Collins wasn't just a pilot. He was a legend in the making. A man whose entire life seemed to have been a preparation for this one impossible mission. He grew up in Reno, Nevada, racing motorcycles at night, often without lights, trusting the feel of the road and the hum of his engine more than his own eyes. This wasn't recklessness. It was an innate, almost spiritual trust in his instruments, an intuition for the machine beneath him that few possessed. His academic credentials were as impressive as his daredevil past. A Stanford degree in aeronautical engineering, giving him a deep, intuitive understanding of the physics that kept him aloft. His military record was impeccable. Multiple tours in Vietnam flying the F-4 Phantom, where he honed his combat skills under extreme pressure. Later, he served as an aggressor squadron instructor, teaching other fighter pilots how to dogfight against Soviet tactics, making him intimately familiar with the very threats he would soon be evading. He was, in short, the perfect blend of academic brilliance, combat experience, and audacious instinct. When the call came for volunteers for a special access program, Collins didn't hesitate. He signed papers that weren't just standard non-disclosure agreements. They were existential waivers, documents that basically stated if he died, if he was captured, if he simply vanished, the Air Force would deny knowing him. His existence, his service, his very sacrifice would be erased from official records. The psychological burden of that commitment, to become a ghost even before the mission began, was immense. The training was brutal, designed to break lesser men and forge the ultimate stealth operators. It began with O3-bar takeoffs from Tonopah, launching into the pre-dawn darkness to practice the unique demands of the Nighthawk. They flew 600-foot AGL, above ground level, runs through the treacherous desert canyons, literally hugging the terrain, navigating by archaic means in a jet that was notoriously unstable. Missions stretched to 12 hours, requiring multiple aerial refuels, each a delicate ballet of precision and patience in the dead of night. Landings were equally harrowing. On a pitch-black strip, illuminated only by glow sticks placed by ground crews wearing night vision goggles. Every single sortie ended in a windowless room nicknamed the Truth Chamber. Here, every maneuver, every decision, every micro-mistake was replayed frame by agonizing frame from cockpit video and telemetry data. Pilots weren't just debriefed. They were forced to narrate their errors, to internalize every flaw until the correct. By December 86th, Ken Collins had logged 312 hours in the F-117, more than anyone else alive. He was the most experienced, the most trusted, the most prepared. He got the nod. The mission brief, delivered in hushed tones, was chillingly precise. Package 1, Target Alpha, radar site at 31 to 20 EN, 65 to go 43 E launch window, 0204 Feb 87. Package will consist of 2 ships. Lead drops, wingman confirms kill. Both recover before sunrise. Officially, of course, the mission didn't exist. Unofficially, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Failure meant not just the loss of 2 pilots and 2 revolutionary aircraft. Failure meant World War III. Because if either pilot was caught alive, if Moscow could parade an American stealth pilot on television, claiming U.S. aggression deep inside Afghanistan, the fragile peace of the Cold War would shatter. It was a mission where the success had to be absolute and the silence eternal. If stories like this, hidden for decades, woven into the fabric of secret history, are your thing, if you crave the untold narratives that shaped our world, then don't just listen. Tap that subscribe button and ring the bell. We've got more Black World tales, more declassified secrets dropping every week. You won't want to miss them. The calendar flipped to January 30th, 1987. The final act of this clandestine drama was about to unfold. At Tonopah, under the cloak of deepest night and an almost obsessive level of secrecy, 2 matte black F-117As, stripped of any identifying marks, were carefully prepared for their long journey. Their engines were removed, their distinctive wings folded, and the entire airframes were loaded into the cavernous belly of C-5 Galaxy transport planes. The crews, dressed in civilian clothes, were indistinguishable from any other cargo handlers, their faces betraying nothing of the monumental task ahead. It was a ghost fleet moving in the shadows. The C-5s didn't fly direct. Their journey was a carefully orchestrated deception, a slow, circuitous route designed to throw off any potential intelligence gathering. First, they landed at Ramstein Air Base in West Germany, a routine stop for military transports. From there, they continued their eastward trek, finally touching down at a classified strip in Oman. This wasn't a bustling international airport. It was an old, forgotten RAF field, carved out of the stark, desolate salt flats baking under the relentless desert sun. There was no control tower, no permanent infrastructure, just a single portable VHF omnidirectional range beacon to guide them in. It was the perfect place for a secret to hide. Reassembly of the delicate F-117s was a painstaking process, taking a grueling 36 hours. Every single wrench, every tool used was meticulously wiped down for fingerprints, leaving no trace of human presence. The attention to detail was fanatical, born of the understanding that even the smallest oversight could compromise the entire mission. Meanwhile, critical intelligence flowed in. Weather intel confirmed a new moon for February 3rd, promising absolute darkness for the ingress. Even better, Soviet ground radar crews in Afghanistan were observed rotating out for their scheduled vodka rations. A euphemism for a period of reduced vigilance, a window of opportunity where their attention might be, shall we say, less than acute. It was, in a word, perfect. The final briefing was held in a makeshift tent shrouded in silence. It was conducted by a CIA analyst, a man whose face was etched with the weariness of 1,000 secrets, a man who never gave his name. He laid out the threats with chilling clarity, projecting infrared shots onto a canvas screen. The radar site wasn't just a building. It was a nest. 6 SA-8. Gecko surface-to-air missile launchers circled it like predatory playing cards, their radar dishes slowly sweeping the sky. In the center, for low-level insult, was a ZSU-23-4 Shilka, a terrifyingly effective anti-aircraft gun. This wasn't just a target. It was a hornet's nest. The escape corridor was meticulously planned. Turn west immediately after weapons release, then dive into the Dashti Margot, the desert of death, a vast, unforgiving expanse of dunes and salt pans, offering natural radar masking. A tanker, a lifeline of fuel, would be waiting over international airspace, a beacon of safety after the perilous journey. Collins, a man of few words but deep emotions, did what many pilots do before such a mission. He wrote a letter to his wife, a private confession of love and fear, sealed it, and left it in a safe. It would only be opened if he didn't come back. The night before launch, he tried to sleep. Technically, he did. But the dreams, one can only imagine, were filled with jagged mountains, spectral MiGs, and the silent, deadly dance he was about to perform. The air was thick with tension, cold and dry from the desert. At 01:47 local time, deep in the pre-dawn blackness of the Omani salt flats, Major Ken Ghost Collins climbed into the cockpit of his F-117A. He ran through his pre-flight checks, each movement precise, practiced 1,000 times. With a heavy thud, the canopy sealed above him, isolating him in his silent, angular world. "Battery start," he muttered, and with a soft click the turbofans began to spool. Not with a roar, but with a whisper, a mere 74 decibels at 50 feet, quieter than a rental car idling in a parking lot. This was the sound of stealth, the sound of a predator moving unseen. Taxiing was an exercise in surrealism. No navigation lights, no flashing strobes to guide the way. Instead, a chase truck, its driver wearing night vision goggles, led the way with an infrared spotlight, a ghostly beam visible only to those wearing specialized optics. The F-117, heavy with fuel and a 2,000-pound GBU-27 bomb, needed every inch of the 9,200-foot runway. The takeoff roll felt interminable, a slow, deliberate acceleration into the unknown. But once airborne, once it shed the drag of the ground, the Nighthawk climbed like an elevator, surprisingly agile for its ungainly appearance, quickly gaining altitude and melting into the inky blackness. Tucked 15 miles astern, a second F-117, piloted by Captain Amy Razor Rodriguez, followed. Her call sign was a testament to her sharp mind and even sharper flying skills. Both aircraft were radio silent, their only communication a series of pre-briefed timing cues for every turn, every altitude change. It was a silent ballet, a synchronized dance of two shadows. Their first lifeline in the vast darkness came in the form of a KC-10 extender tanker, waiting 200 miles north over the Gulf of Oman. The rendezvous was flawless, a testament to the pilot's skill and the tanker crew's patience. Collins plugged into the drogue, a momentary umbilical cord connecting him to the lifeblood of fuel, taking on 16,000 pounds of jet propellant. The metallic clang of the connection, the rumble of the fuel flowing, was a brief, comforting interruption in the silence. Then, with a practiced disconnect, he vanished south again, leaving the tanker to its solitary vigil. From this point on, the world outside his cockpit was no longer just dark. It was dark blue, the deep, impenetrable blackness of a sky devoid of any friendly light, stretching endlessly towards the hostile mountains of Afghanistan. The mission was truly underway. The F-117 sliced across the Afghan border at precisely 0410 local time. A silent, invisible invasion. Their speed was a blistering 540 knots. Their altitude a terrifyingly low 400 feet above the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush. Inside Collins's cockpit, the world was a study in controlled chaos. The only illumination came from the faint red backlight of the instrument panel, casting an eerie glow on his oxygen mask. The engine gauges, tiny and precise, were the size of poker chips, demanding intense focus. The loudest sound, paradoxically, was his own breath, amplified by the oxygen mask, a constant, rhythmic reminder of his own fragile mortality. Every minute, Collins flipped the radar altimeter, a nervous habit, a life-or-death check. 300 feet, 250 feet, any lower, and he risked becoming a lawnmower for an unsuspecting goat, or worse, a permanent fixture on an anonymous Afghan peak. The margin for error was non-existent. Miles away at a Soviet early warning radar station near coast, a blip appeared on a console. Briefly. Then it vanished. The ground operator, accustomed to radar glitches and the unpredictable returns from mountain terrain, logged it as an anomaly, probable flock of birds. A sigh of relief, a shrug, and back to the routine. The F-117's carefully engineered radar cross-section, scattering the radar waves, had worked its magic. They were ghosts, just as intended. At 0432, Collins executed a precise pop-up maneuver, climbing to 1,000 feet. His nose was cold, meaning no active radar emissions to betray his presence. The bomb bay doors, meticulously aligned and sealed, were pre-armed, ready to unleash their deadly payload. His eyes, trained to perfection, scanned the terrain below. The target's initial point, IP, was a dried riverbed, distinctively shaped like a question mark, exactly as the satellite photos had promised. He saw it. A confirmation that his navigation had been flawless, that he was precisely where he needed to be. 40 seconds to release, 40 seconds to change history. Then the universe, in its infinite capacity for chaos, decided the plan was just a little too neat. A sudden, unexpected flicker on his threat warning receiver. A subtle shift in the air, a gut feeling that screamed, danger. The carefully constructed calm shattered. Just as Collins was locking onto his target, the universe decided to throw a wrench into the meticulously planned operation. 2 Soviet MiG-29s, call signs Blue 41 and Blue 42, had scrambled from Shindand Air Base. Their exercise mission abruptly changed to a live intercept. The coast radar operator, despite dismissing Collins's initial blip as birds, had screamed, possible intruder, up the chain of command, a desperate gut instinct report that couldn't be ignored. The MiGs were flying southeast, their powerful Klimov RD-33 engines burning bright, afterburners painting fiery trails across the night sky. They weren't relying solely on radar. Their IRST, infrared search and track systems, were actively scanning, passively hunting for heat signatures. Collins's threat warning receiver, designed to alert him to radar locks, remained eerily dark. The F-117's faceted design, combined with the export-grade Soviet radars, meant no definitive spike, no piercing alarm, but his eyes, honed by years of combat flying, caught something. 2 distinct glowing torches paralleling his path about 5,000 feet above him. They were the MiG-29s, their afterburners blazing. His stomach clenched. If they descended, if their powerful look-down radar got even a sniff of his presence, he was toast. Not a chance. The rules of engagement, hammered into him during countless debriefs, echoed in his mind. You are a ghost. If intercepted, do not fire, do not transmit, evade. Abort only if painted and locked. He was a phantom, meant to be unseen, unheard. Engaging was not an option. It would confirm his presence, reveal the F-117's existence, and ignite the war he was here to prevent. He was just 12 miles from his target, a mere stone's throw. The bomb run, the critical window for precision, would take a mere 20 seconds. Decision time. an agonizing split-second calculation with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Should he press the attack, risking immediate detection and engagement, or jettison his fuel tanks, abort the mission, and run for his life? Collins did neither. With a surge of adrenaline and an almost preternatural calm, he banked his F-117 a sharp 15 degrees, dropping into a canyon so impossibly tight his wingtips felt like they would scrape the sandstone walls. He throttled back to a whisper-quiet 0.65 Mach, letting the MiGs, still flying high and fast, overshoot him. The Soviet pilots, losing contact with their elusive anomaly, assumed a radar ghost, a malfunction, another trick of the mountains. Frustrated, they turned north, away from the target area. Collins, breathing a silent prayer, leveled out. The target was now just 8 miles away. He quickly redesignated with his infrared laser, the crosshairs settling precisely on the radar bunker. With a firm press of the pickle switch, one GBU-27 slid off the rail. Its guidance fins popped open, and it locked onto the laser spot on the roof of the radar bunker. The jet pitched up as the bomb cleared, and Collins yanked back on the stick, pulling a punishing 5 Gs, turning hard west, diving into the protective embrace of the Dashti Margot. Behind him, 2,000 pounds of high explosive, armed with a delayed fuse, punched through 3 meters of reinforced concrete, burrowing deep beside the radar transmitter. Then a silent subterranean detonation. The shockwave rippled outward, flattening the massive antennas like stalks of wheat. No secondary explosions, thankfully. No nukes on site, but the entire sector went dark. For 72 hours, the Soviet Union's eye over Afghanistan was blind. Western Pakistan breathed a collective sigh of relief. SAC's vital bomber routes into Soviet territory remained safe, unexposed. Collins didn't know it yet, but in that terrifying, exhilarating moment he had just averted a strategic checkmate, preventing a potential escalation that could have spiraled into global conflict. The immediate danger of the MiGs was past, but Collins wasn't out of the woods yet. A quick glance at his fuel gauge confirmed his worst fears. 400 pounds. That was bingo plus 300, meaning just enough to make it to the tanker with a mere 300 pounds of reserve. Every drop counted now. He descended again, plunging to a terrifying 200 feet, weaving through the labyrinthine ravines of the Dashti Margot, the desert of death. His throttle was at military power, pushing the Nighthawk to its maximum efficient speed, eating up the miles. Suddenly, Captain Rodriguez, Razor, his wingman, broke the radio silence with a terse, urgent call. Her voice, usually calm and measured, held a note of strain. "Tally-ho, 2 SA-8s, 10 o'clock, searching." Collins' heart leaped into his throat. More threats. These were mobile surface-to-air missile systems deployed on the ridges like angry meerkats, their radar dishes slowly, relentlessly spinning, searching for any anomaly in the pre-dawn gloom. They hadn't locked on yet, but they were active, probing. Both Nighthawks maintained their nose-cold status, meaning no active radar emissions. Their unique design extended to their engines. Exhaust diffusers, a marvel of stealth engineering, mixed the 800-degree exhaust gases with ambient air, drastically lowering the infrared plume. This made them nearly invisible to heat-seeking missiles, their IR signature dropping to near background levels, blending with the cool desert air. It was their last line of defense against the searching SA-8s. The minutes crawled by, each one an eternity. At 05:05, a faint blip appeared on Collins's navigation display, the tanker track. A wave of exhaustion, mixed with profound relief, washed over him. They reached the KC-10, plugged in and topped up their tanks, the lifeblood of fuel flowing again. With their reserves restored, they turned south, heading for the desolate strip of salt in Oman, the only friendly patch of ground for hundreds of miles. Sunrise, a fiery red smear across the eastern horizon, was just beginning to paint the sky when the tires of their F-117s kissed the Omani concrete. The landing was precise, almost gentle, a testament to the pilot's skill even after hours of intense high-stress flying. Ground crews, their faces grim with worry, rushed to the aircraft. They found goat hair in the wheel wells, a stark, undeniable testament to just how low Collins and Rodriguez had flown, literally brushing the desert floor. But there were no bullet holes, no hydraulic leaks, no critical damage. The mission, against all odds, was a success. Mission time, 3 hours and 28 minutes. And the world, utterly oblivious to the silent drama that had just unfolded, was still asleep. The morning after, as the sun climbed over the Arabian Peninsula, the truth of the mission began to manifest itself, though silently and invisibly to the world. Within hours, overhead satellite images began to stream into intelligence centers. The radar site near Kandahar, just a day before a bustling hub of Soviet activity, was now a crater. Steel girders, once structural, were twisted like spaghetti, a grotesque sculpture of destruction. There was no trace of what had hit it, no telltale signs of conventional bombardment. The destruction was surgical, absolute, and utterly baffling. The Soviets, reeling from the sudden, inexplicable loss of a critical strategic asset, suspected sabotage. Their internal reports pointed fingers at the Mujahideen, speculating that they must have been supplied with some new, incredibly potent U.S. explosives. It was the only explanation that made sense within their existing paradigm. Washington, meanwhile, issued no statements, no leaks, no triumphant declarations. Pakistan, keenly aware of the delicate geopolitical dance, vehemently denied any overflight by American aircraft. The official story was silence, a vacuum of information designed to prevent any escalation. Back in Oman, the two F-117s were already undergoing their own erasure. Wrapped in tarpaulins hidden from prying eyes, they were loaded back into the C-5 Galaxies. Their journey this time was to Palmdale, California, another clandestine Lockheed facility. There they were meticulously repainted, their unique black sheen replaced with standard camouflage. Their tail numbers were changed, their maintenance logs wiped clean of any record of the Afghan mission. It was as if they had never left, never flown that impossible sortie. The pilots, Collins and Rodriguez, were debriefed exhaustively, then sworn to a lifetime of silence. Their oath was not just to the Air Force, but to national security itself. For the next decade, even Congress's most hawkish intelligence committees were kept in the dark. They simply didn't know the raid had happened. It was a secret held so tightly by so few that it effectively didn't exist. Collins, the man who had faced down MiGs and SAMs in the dead of night, received a civilian Distinguished Flying Cross. The ceremony was sealed, quiet, devoid of fanfare. The citation, a masterpiece of bureaucratic obfuscation, read simply, "For services rendered in classified testing." He pinned it inside a safe, a silent companion to the unmailed letter to his wife. The Cold War ended 4 years later, not with a bang but a whimper. Nobody, outside a tiny select circle, ever connected the dots between that silent night in Afghanistan and the subtle shift in the strategic balance that followed. The secret held. For 20 years, the secret held buried deep in classified files, a ghost story whispered among a handful of Black World veterans. But secrets, especially those of such magnitude, rarely stay buried forever. The slow, inexorable march of history, coupled with the persistent efforts of historians and journalists, began to chip away at the wall of silence. In the mid-2000s, Freedom of Information Act requests, persistent and targeted, finally began to pry loose heavily redacted memos, fragments of a truth long denied. Then came the undeniable evidence. National Reconnaissance Office (NRO) satellite photos, now declassified, showed the radar site in Afghanistan. One image, dated February 2, 1987, showed it fully operational. The next, dated February 4th, showed nothing but a crater. The timeline was irrefutable. Something significant had happened between those two dates. The first crack in the human wall of silence came in 2007. A retired CIA officer, then 78 years old, his memory perhaps less guarded by the passage of time and the fading intensity of his oath, mentioned a lucky shot by a black jet in an oral history interview. The tape, containing this tantalizing hint, was quietly archived at Maxwell Air Force Base, a small thread for future historians to pull. In 2011, a Russian general writing his memoirs finally put words to the long-held Soviet suspicion. He claimed without definitive proof that a stealth aircraft destroyed our Afghan early warning node. Moscow, he explained, never escalated the incident because they had zero proof. No wreckage, no radar track, no captured pilots, just a vanished site and a perplexing mystery. The general's account, once dismissed as Cold War paranoia, suddenly resonated with the newly declassified U.S. evidence. Analysts, poring over the newly revealed information, began to connect the dots. They realized that the sudden, inexplicable gap in the Soviet air defense picture that winter had a profound impact. It allowed U.S. strategic planners to keep their SIOP, Strategic Integrated Operations Plan, roots viable. SIOP, for those unfamiliar, was the nuclear playbook, the carefully choreographed flight paths for American bombers carrying nuclear weapons deep into Soviet territory. If the Kandahar radar had gone live, those routes would have been compromised, forcing a dangerous and destabilizing recalculation of America's nuclear deterrent. In short, one pilot's impossible night run, a single act of surgical precision in the mountains of Afghanistan, may well have prevented a far wider escalation later, simply by keeping the nuclear balance ambiguous, by preserving the West's strategic options. Ken Collins, by then a retired Air Force colonel, teaching aerospace engineering at the University of Alabama, received a phone call. The voice on the other end was official, deferential, and long overdue. "Sir," it said, "you are cleared to speak on background." Collins, a man who had carried the weight of this secret for over 2 decades, let out a wry laugh. "I've been talking to my wife for 20 years, he quipped, a hint of long-suffering amusement in his voice. "She just didn't believe me." The ghost finally was allowed to speak. The mission, that impossible flight over the Hindu Kush, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that stealth wasn't just a gimmick, a fleeting technological fancy. It was a profound geopolitical tool, a silent hammer that could reshape conflicts before they even began. The F-117 Nighthawk, once the most closely guarded secret in aviation, went on to fly into Baghdad on the very first night of Desert Storm in 1991, spearheading the air campaign with 0 losses. Its success wasn't just a combat victory, it was a psychological one, proving that American air power could reach anywhere, anytime, undetected. From that angular, hopeless diamond design, a powerful lineage was born. The B-2 Spirit bomber with its graceful, bat-like flying wing, the F-22 Raptor, the world's first 5th-generation air superiority fighter, and the F-35 Lightning II, a multi-role stealth fighter now deployed by dozens of nations. All of them inherited the F-117's DNA. Shape first, signature second, everything else a distant third. The fundamental principle, control your radar cross-section through geometry, became the bedrock of modern combat aircraft design. Today, that legacy continues to evolve. The B-21 Raider, America's newest stealth bomber, is pushing the boundaries even further, promising even greater range, payload, and evasive capabilities. Whispers of 6th-generation fighters like the F-47, with their rumored Stealth++ technology, suggest an even deeper dive into active stealth systems and AI-driven evasion. Even unmanned loyal wingman drones designed to fly alongside manned aircraft trace their silent lineage back to that chilly night in 1987. They are all descendants of a single black jet, a single pilot, and a mission on the edge of the world that held the line between peace and a planetary firestorm. And here's a surprising twist, a legacy you might never expect. Every time you board a modern airliner, say a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, remember this story. The very same mathematical principles that curved those stealthy facets on the F-117, complex edge diffraction equations designed to scatter radar waves, are now used to quiet cabin noise. The computational fluid dynamics that shaped the Nighthawk's unique aerodynamics now optimize the airflow over commercial wings, making flights smoother and more fuel-efficient. Stealth, born from the urgent need to avoid detection in war, unintentionally gave us quieter, safer airliners. And for one terrifying pivotal moment, it kept superpowers from pulling the triggers of global war. That's a legacy worth remembering. So next time somebody confidently declares that technology can't change history, tell them about Ken Collins. Tell them about the ghost of the Hindu Kush, flying 400 feet above Afghanistan, invisible, alone, with the entire world's fate riding on whether he climbed or dived. His story isn't just about a plane. It's about the profound, often unseen impact of human courage married to groundbreaking innovation. If you hunger for more declassified stories, for the hidden truths that prove fiction often pales in comparison to reality, then don't just walk away. Hit that subscribe button, smash the bell notification, and drop a comment below. What other secret mission should we uncover next? What other untold chapter of history is waiting to be revealed? Stay curious, stay informed, and remember, Sometimes the most important events are the ones nobody hears about. Until now.